Do you feel like you're stuck in a never-ending cycle of rehab and recovery? It's frustrating, isn't it? You spent all this time working on your rehab and finally you're back to pain-free running and feeling good until the injury resurfaces and sends you back to square one. Instead, imagine being able to run pain-free without the fear of re-injury. In this video, I'm going to share with you my top secrets for preventing running injuries so you can finally achieve your running goals and enjoy the sport you love. And at the end, I'm going to give my definition of true injury prevention, which might surprise you. Step one is to make sure you have correctly rehabbed your initial injury or any other significant injury in the past, which you'll learn by going through the first 9 steps of this playlist. If this is the first time you've heard about this playlist, here is the link to go back to step 1. If you have watched all the previous videos, hopefully by now you have a comprehensive understanding and know all the pieces of your rehab you need to integrate. Step 2, once you're free of symptoms, is to continue your rehab. That's right, even once you're back to pain-free running, your rehab exercises are still important. But if you've truly reached your physical goal and bridged the gap effectively in the rehab ladder, the rehab exercises can enter a maintenance phase, in which only need to be done about once a week. And hopefully by now the exercises have progressed enough for them to be quite heavy and quite challenging to do, therefore once a week will suffice. However, if your goals change and the physical demands increase, your rehab can't sit in this maintenance phase anymore and you need to pick it up. Let's use Cody as an example. Say his initial goal was to run a slow 10K. His rehab increased to heavy full range squats and step ups twice a week. And when he reached this goal, he backed off to once a week. But 2 months later, he reevaluated his goals and decided to train for a half marathon. He recognized that the capacity in his knees will need to increase to give himself the best chance without the injury resurfacing. So he gradually builds up his weekly running mileage while resuming his strength exercises twice a week and progresses the weight when necessary. Step 3 to prevent an injury resurfacing is to add exercises that use the entire kinetic chain, not just the muscle or joint that is injured. For example, if you want to rehab your plantar fascia, you could start with towel scrunches and calf raises, but eventually you want to strengthen your foot with single leg balance exercises and barefoot walking with weights. This will restore the capacity of the area, but also integrate the entire leg. You might find this hard to believe, but research shows that the strongest factor in you developing an injury is if you've had another injury within the past 12 months. This can be interpreted in a few ways, but I believe one of the key reasons research reveals this is because rehab is inadequate. So make sure the above rules are followed and avoid becoming a part of this statistic. Step 4 is to layer in plyometrics or power-based rehab exercises, if you so want to introduce things like speed work or strides or intervals or sprints. You can actually do this in 2 ways. If you do want to do speed work, you can first introduce speed work very gradually and use stepping stones to progress from one step to the next. The second way you can implement this is by introducing power into your rehab and layer in a more robust foundation before running speed sessions are introduced. Some of my favorites are jump rope, box jumps, kettlebell swings, and plyo lunges, but there are a ton out there to suit your needs and your goals. The 5th way to reduce the risk of your injury resurfacing is an important one, and is to back off your training loads when stress, sleep, and nutrition are negatively impacted. We've learned from earlier videos that these elements impact your body's ability to adapt. In other words, you struggle to recover and bounce back from your workouts. So, if you encounter moments in your life where you're stressed or not sleeping that well, make a conscious decision to dial back the intensity or volume of your weekly load. This will ensure that the load does not exceed the capacity and symptoms don't resurface. And finally, we have expectations. I'm going to tell you a story. I suffered from proximal hamstring tendinopathy for about 4 years. I was training for sprint distance triathlons and my upper hamstrings were overloaded. Once I stopped those triathlons and kept running, the upper hamstring pain persisted. It even carried over into everyday life. So sitting became irritating, and even when I was treating patients in my physio room, leaning over the table to treat those patients was even annoying. But I finally followed these principles you now know, and I'm glad to say that I've been symptom-free for the last 3 years. But this is where it comes back to expectations. If I decide to enter another sprint distance triathlon and don't go through the proper training, I expect my hamstring to flare up again. Yes, I do routinely do things like deadlifts and hamstring curls and kettlebell swings to keep the capacity of my hamstrings high, but I wouldn't be surprised if symptoms returned once I abruptly tested my limitations. Which brings me to my final point. You can't get your risk of injury down to 0. It's an unrealistic expectation if you strive for this. Yes, you can do a lot in your power to get close to 0, but if you ever decide to push your capabilities, say when preparing for a race or trying to push a PB within a certain race, the risk of an injury starts to increase. But if you can identify the early signs of an injury and know exactly what to do to negotiate the symptoms quickly, and you return back to pain-free running without losing fitness, that's my definition of injury prevention. And there we have it, the 10 stages on this playlist. Now I'm using these 10 principles and guiding real injured runners and recording their rehab journeys. So make sure you subscribe if you want to keep up to date and see what it's like using these principles in the real world.